Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Alias Secure AF podcast, the podcast about all things cybersecurity. I'm your host, Teddy Underkoffler. Today I'm joined with Andrew Peters, our digital forensics examiner and security engineer here at Alias. So we're going to talk about digital forensics today, a little bit about what it is, who needs it, things like that. So, Peters, as we call you in the office, since we have like 5 Andrews, do you want to go ahead and kick it off?
Yeah, sure. So basically, digital forensics is considered to be the application of computer science to law. That's the simple definition of it.
Okay.
But there's so much more that goes into it.
Mm-hmm. So then I guess we'll just go ahead and start. How does forensics differ from digital forensics?
It really doesn't that much. One of the main principles of forensic science is called Lacard's exchange principle. It's the principle that whenever somebody visits a crime scene, they take something with them and they leave something behind. And the exact same thing happens in computers as well.
Okay, so there's always going to be like a fingerprint on people's computers, essentially.
Exactly.
Okay. So then who needs digital forensics? What are some use cases for digital forensics?
The list goes on and on. Mostly criminal investigations, civil investigations, and military intelligence as well.
And what are some examples of like a business case, I guess? Like, what are some cases you've worked, obviously withholding all the information?
Most of the cases I've worked so far are intellectual property theft. A business thinks that an employee is maybe stealing company documents, and they want to find out what's going on there, see if they need to terminate them or if they need to pursue legal action. So.
Okay. Let's see. I guess let's get kind of back into, you had mentioned before we actually began recording this that there are kind of 7 steps to digital forensics. So if I was to call our office and say, I'm a business, I need you to see if there's an insider threat or that someone stole some IP off of a device, what are the next steps? What happens?
So the first step in the forensic process is going to be search authority. So of course, if you're a business calling us asking for our services, that's going to be our search authority. But if you're law enforcement, this is going to be a search warrant or a subpoena or consent from an individual. But if you work on the civil side of things like we do normally, we're going to get our search authority from either consent or a court order.
And so that just means that they're consenting for you to search through the entire device and try and find something specific, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And then what comes after that?
So after you have proper search authority, the next big thing is chain of custody. If you can't keep track of where the evidence was at all times, it's not going to be allowed to be used in court. Same thing with search authority.
So then what is a chain of custody? How do you keep track of it?
So a chain of custody is a document that basically keeps track of where the evidence is and who's in possession of it from the time it's collected to the time the case is closed.
Okay. And you basically, I guess, just like write it down on a piece of paper. Like if I had my computer and I gave it to you, then from that point you would hold it on for yourself, or if you gave it to someone else, maybe like the court or something, you just have to kind of make sure it was signed off and kept track of throughout the entire process, right?
Yeah, most chain of custody forms are on a sheet of paper where you sign it to an individual, but some laboratories even have a digital system where you can scan barcodes.
Oh, okay. That's cool. So then what's the next step? After I've given you my device, we've signed over chain of custody, then what?
The next step is going to be actually imaging the device. So normally with forensic science, it's always better to work with an original instead of a copy, but with digital forensics, it's kind of the opposite. You want to make sure you don't delete or destroy any data that's on the drive. So we're going to make a forensic image of it, or a bitstream copy, where we basically copy the entire hard drive, and we use that to do all of our forensic processing on, so we don't accidentally destroy the original drive.
So then if you accidentally destroy the copy, you can just make another copy of the original.
Exactly.
Okay. And then you've made a copy. Now what?
So next we're going to do something called hash it. So a hash value is basically a mathematical algorithm that it creates a unique alphanumeric identifier for it. So if you even change one single bit on the hard drive, the hash value is going to look completely different. It's kind of like a digital fingerprint. It's basically our way of validating that the evidence is original and valid.
Okay. And you can only do that once, I assume?
No, you can do that as multiple times as you need to.
Okay.
But it should be the same number every time.
Okay. So you have one specific number. Every time you do it, you get the same number? Am I following correctly?
You should if nothing on the device has been changed.
Gotcha. But if something has been changed, you will get a different number.
Exactly.
And then you know it's been changed.
Exactly.
Okay. And so that's how it kind of holds up in court, so that way they know whether it's been changed with, tampered with, etc.
Yes.
Okay. And then after that, what's next?
So next, we actually want to validate our tools. Our forensic tools, most places use like a forensic toolkit or magnet axiom, but anytime you have a software update or anytime you are going to work a case, you want to validate your tools with a test image. And this is basically to make sure that your tools are working properly and producing accurate results.
Makes sense. You need to make sure your tools are going to do what they're supposed to do, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And so you do it on a different device, validate your tools on something else or do you do it on the copy?
You would keep a test image specifically for that purpose.
Okay.
That you would process with the tools and examine just to make sure that ideally one that you know exactly what's on there, you know what you're supposed to find, you know what you shouldn't find. So you test the tools to make sure that you're not going to find any artifacts from other cases, as well as making sure that it's finding all of the artifacts on your current case.
Okay, so then once you validate that the tools are in working order, then are you able to start your investigation?
Yes.
And then tell me about that. What's that process like?
The next step is going to be quality assurance and repeatability. So you want to make sure that you have everything set up so any other forensic examiner at your organization can immediately come in after you, follow the exact same steps, and get the exact same results.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. It's kind of like a science, right? You have to make sure you can repeat it so that way the results are accurate and correct, right?
Exactly.
Okay. How long does an investigation typically take? I brought you my device. I said, hey, I need you to find out if some files have been taken or whatnot. What's, the general time frame for that sort of stuff?
It really kind of just depends on the nature of the case and if there's any exigent circumstances involved. For instance, if the government believes that they have a credible intel on a possible terror threat, they might seize a device and perform a forensic investigation on it immediately. Something in law enforcement, or they have an unsolved homicide case, it might take 6 months to get around to.
So then you just kind of hold on to the device until then, or it just...
Yeah, if you have a significant backlog of devices that need to be taken care of, like what typically happens at state and federal crime labs, then it will just be submitted to the evidence locker and kept there until it's needed.
Okay. I guess that makes sense. So then what happens after the investigation?
So during and after the investigation, the next step is reporting. So we need to make sure we keep detailed notes on everything we do for the purpose of repeatability, and also leading up to the next step is expert witness presentation. So we need to make sure that we have a well-documented note so we can properly present that evidence to the jury, especially law enforcement investigators. Sometimes it can be several years before that trial actually comes around. So taking good quality notes is how you ensure that you can review those before the trial and make sure that everything you're saying is truthful.
Yeah, I mean, if it's going to take a couple of years after you've done the investigation, then when you have to testify, I imagine a strong report with a lot of good notes is critical.
Yeah, the reporting never stops in digital forensics.
Gotcha. Gosh, it really does take that long for some of those court cases. So you've done the expert witness then, right? You've actually gone to testify in court for some cases, and I know Alias has as well, correct?
Yeah, I personally haven't, but I accompanied Donovan, our CEO. I accompanied him to a hearing, but they did not call me to testify.
Okay, but you were still there?
Yes.
In case they did call to testify? Yeah. Okay, that's very cool. So then I guess what's next after testifying? Is there really anything else left in the process?
Generally, no, and a lot of times the process might not even go that far. So, for instance, if you have a court case where they're looking for intellectual property theft and you do an examination and you don't find any evidence that, company property was taken from the device, the investigation might end there after a report. So expert witness presentation isn't always needed, but when it is needed, you better make sure you do it right.
Okay, yeah. So, and that's essentially the 7 steps of digital forensics, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. And that's kind of, we talked pretty heavily about the individual side. So then what about digital forensics more on the cybersecurity side? what about, I've been hearing DFIR get thrown around. We use digital forensics in incident response, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what DFIR stands for, and that's essentially what most incident response is. A company gets ransomware. A big part of the investigation or a big part of the response is figuring out how it happened. You want to figure out how it happened, not only so you can, mitigate the issue and make sure it doesn't happen again, but if it's applicable, you also want to make sure that you have evidence to take somebody to court if you need to.
And so you kind of use those 7 steps, even in an incident response situation then?
Exactly.
Okay. So it's just kind of like a whole like a repeatability process where regardless of the situation, you're able to fall back on those steps and know, I will do these in this order, and then whatever the outcome may be.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, every digital forensics laboratory should have a set of standard operating procedures, and those 7 steps are pretty much the main operating procedures that all forensic labs kind of base theirs off of. Those are the 7 required steps that everyone should be taking.
Okay. Now I kind of, want to talk a little bit about you. How did you get into digital forensics, right? I mean, did you take classes for it? Did you get certifications for it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I decided when I was in high school that I wanted to pursue digital forensics in college. So I started going to the University of Central Oklahoma. It's the best forensics school in the entire nation. Their staff has insane amount of combined years experience working for the FBI, and they were all, they had groundbreaking technologies. They were the leader of their field. The director of the department, Dr. Adams, he was the first FBI agent to testify using DNA evidence in court.
Oh, wow.
And he also used to be the head of the entire FBI crime lab in Quantico. And they have a bunch of other professors there that, once again, top of their field, had groundbreaking discoveries in forensic science. So it's local, so decided I wanted to go to UCO, started studying digital forensics, and I got an internship at Alias, and here I am.
And it was happily ever after, right? Let's see. Is there anything else I didn't ask you about digital forensics you wish you wanted to touch on?
There is so much more to talk about, but we could sit here forever and talk about it.
But at least on the fundamentals, right? The basic, what is digital forensics? Do you feel like we kind of covered that well enough?
Yeah, I think so. Once again, it's the application of computer science to law in a nutshell.
Awesome. Well, Peter, thank you so much for joining me on the episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me.